Cardiac activity. So if I talk about the cardiac activity, then the heart, it is a muscular organ which is composed of specialized muscles which is known as the cardiac muscles. So the muscles of the heart is known as the cardiac muscle, and the main function of the human heart is to pump blood to various parts of the body. Now, there are several internal factors which enable the human heart to regulate its activity on its own. But there are some external influences as well which regulates the cardiac activity. So, these factors may include the autonomous, autonomic nervous system, chemicals like hormones, ions, etc. So this is what the all about the function of the heart. The heart is made up of the cardiac muscle. Then we will be discussing about the introduction, that what is a cardiac cycle. Now, so this part I have already discussed with you. This is the introduction part. So this part I have already discussed with you. Now comes the cardiac cycle. So cardiac cycle helps in the circulation of the blood. It includes the systole and diastole. So what is systole here? Systole comprises of the contraction of the cardiac muscle, whereas the diastole, it comprises of the relaxation of the muscles. So the cardiac cycle, it is the normal activity of the human heart, and it is being regulated autonomically by the nodal tissues, which is known as the SA node and the AV node. So the full forms are written here. There is a sino-arterial node and the arterioventricular node. So these are the two nodes or the nodal tissues through which the activity of the cardiac cycle is being maintained. Now, the variation in the cardiac cycle results in an increase or decrease in the cardiac output. So if there is any variation in the cardiac cycle, it may lead to the increase or decrease in the cardiac output. Now, the occurrence of cardiac cycle is illustrated by the heartbeat rate, which is the number of beats per minute. So a healthy human heart will beat about 72 times or 72 beats per minute. So it can also be stated as 72 cardiac cycles per minute. So this is the heartbeat of a healthy human heart. Now, here this figure, it is representing the cardiac cycle. So this is the cardiac cycle here. So as it is written start here, so this first started is there. There is a isovolumetric or isovolumetric relaxation where the ventricular diastole is there, which is the early phase. After this, there is a late phase in which the filling happens. Then arterial contraction, in which the arterial systole begins. Then volumetric contraction, ventricular contraction, which is the first phase, and the ejection. So the blood ejects from here and is being from the aorta and is being distributed to the whole of the body. So this is the cardiac cycle. Now we have autonomic regulation. So what is autonomic regulation? There is a cardiac output variation and rhythmatic control which can be achieved by the autonomous nervous system, which impulse the generation. Now, medulla oblongata. It is the part of the brain which is responsible for the ANS activity, that is the autonomic nervous system activity. So this ANS consists of two nerves, that is the sympathetic nerves and the parasympathetic nerves. So here in the heading also it has been written like this. So what are these? So there is a stimulation of sympathetic nerve which leads to stronger ventricular and arterial contraction, and it will increase the cardiac output, which means it will lead to the increase in the rate of the heart. Whereas if I talk about the parasympathetic nerves, then it will reduce the contraction of the arteria and ventricles. So arteria and the ventricles, they are the chambers of the heart. So what the parasympathetic stimulation does, it reduces the contraction, and this results in less cardiac output and the heart rate. So it will result in less cardiac output and the heart rate. So this was about the autonomic regulation. Now if I talk about the chemical regulation, hormones and ions. So apart from the autonomic regulation, which includes the two terms, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nerves, here we will be talking about the hormones and the ions. So there are certain chemicals which can affect the regulation of the cardiac activity. And what are these hormones? So these hormones includes the epinephrine, norepinephrine and the thyroxine. So these ions, they increase the contraction and the heart rate, and the ions, they will, and the are the other chemicals that can impact on the heart. So here the regulation of the cardiac activity, it has been influenced not only by these factors, but gender of an individual can also play a major role in the chemical regulation, that is the hormones and the ions. So this was all about the regulation of the cardiac activity. These are some of the references. Thank you.